Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Wicked Sports Podcast. Today is the 13th of January, 2025, and we're going to be talking about all the stuff that happened this weekend. I hope you had a great weekend. I really appreciate you checking out the channel, checking out the podcast in this kind of rebooted format. I've been having a lot of fun doing it, and I hope that you've been having a lot of fun listening along. So let's get into the biggest news in the NFL world, anyways. Wildcard weekend nearly complete, not quite. We still got one more game later on this evening. If you're listening to this on the 13th, if not in the future, then yeah, that game's done. We'll talk about it in the next episode. So let's start off with the Houston Texans and Los Angeles Chargers, where the Texans defeated the Chargers 32-12. Justin Herbert had a, really bad game. He went 14 of 32, 242 yards, one touchdown, four interceptions. J.K. Dobbins had 26 yards rushing, and Lad McCarthy had 9 receptions for 197 yards, one touchdown. Monster game from him. Unfortunately, not enough for the Texans. C.J. Stroud, 282 yards, one touchdown, one pick. Joe Mixon, 106 yards on 25 carries and a touchdown. And Nico Collins, 7 receptions, 122 yards, and one touchdown. So the Texans are moving on. I'm 0-1 for this week in my picks. I thought the Chargers were going to get the better of the Texans, but no, this is really dominant performance by the Texans, by D'Amico Ryan's defense especially. So we'll see as they move on. They're going to have to play the Kansas City Chiefs in Arrowhead. Never easy, but, good defense. So I guess we could possibly see an upset. I don't know. I'm probably being a little too optimistic there. As for the Chargers, hey, this doesn't help the Herbert, apologists. I know, much like Tua, Herbert is constantly maligned and constantly praised by two different sections of the fan base, though I do think he's praised pretty often. But this was a disaster class of a performance by Herbert. 4 interceptions, not good, not acceptable, and the Chargers have a lot to think about as they head into the offseason here. Moving on to the Ravens and Steelers game, the Steelers were defeated 28-14. So Russell Wilson, 270 yards, 2 touchdowns. Najee Harris, 17 yards rushing, not getting it done there. George Pickens, 5 receptions, 87 yards, 1 touchdown. Great game from him. Had a positive impact. You never know what you're going to get with Pickens, but it was very good. Lamar Jackson, absolute beast in this game. 175 yards, 2 touchdowns. Made it so hard for Pittsburgh to defend with his, potential runs. And then Derrick Henry, 186 yards, 2 touchdowns on the ground. And Isaiah Likely, 3 receptions for 53 yards to lead the way. So a lot of grumbling from Steelers fans. They want Mike Tomlin fired. He hasn't won a playoff game in years. He's, above mediocre, but that's it in the last maybe decade or so since they won the Super Bowl. I said decade since they won the Super Bowl. That was like 2008. It's been a little while. They won again in 2011, I think, for the 2010 season, but they did lose that one. So just been, a lot of falling short for this storied franchise. As for the Ravens, play like that, they have a chance. They're going to be playing Buffalo next week. That should be such an exciting game to watch for the fans. And I'm hopeful as a Dolphins fan and a Lamar Jackson fan, but most importantly as a Bills hater, that the Ravens will get the win there. So we will see next week. So the Buffalo Bills laid the smackdown 31-7 on the Denver Broncos to advance to the divisional round. It was 10-7 at halftime, almost 10-10. And then the Bills just dominated the second half. Bo Nix, 144 yards, 1 touchdown. He also led the way rushing with 43 yards on 4 carries. Courtland Sutton had the most receiving yards for the Broncos on 5 receptions. He had 75 yards. For the Bills, 272 yards, 2 touchdowns. James Cook, great game, 120 yards and a touchdown. And Curtis Samuel, 3 receptions, 68 yards, and 1 touchdown. So I think most of us kind of expected this to be the outcome. This is like almost a yearly tradition where the Buffalo Bills just mollywallop whoever they play in the first round. We'll see who, or we'll see how rather they do against the Ravens next week. I think that should be a much better game. The Ravens beat them pretty handily earlier in the season, but the Bills do have a lot of players who were injured for that game who are now back uninjured. So we'll see if that changes things. You know, it's the playoffs. Anything can happen. Both the Ravens and the Bills have been, I don't want to say chokers, but they've not gotten where they want to be in this Patrick Mahomes era. So now they'll have to beat the shit out of each other and then probably go to Arrowhead to try to advance to the Super Bowl. So we will see what happens there. Next up, we had the Philadelphia Eagles defeating the Green Bay Packers 22-10 to advance to the divisional round. Jordan Love's 212 yards, not enough because he threw 3 interceptions. Not good. Josh Jacobs, really MVP for the Packers in this game. 81 yards and a touchdown, but he was running so hard. Gave the Packers life in some ways where they didn't have any on offense. And then Jaden Reed, 4 receptions, 46 yards. Jalen Hurts, 131 yards, 2 touchdowns. Saquon Barkley, 119 yards on the ground. And Devonta Smith, 4 receptions, 55 yards. So I think most people probably expected the Eagles to come out on top here in this game. I don't know if a lot of people thought it would feel as uncompetitive as it ended up being. I certainly didn't. But the bigger story, not the bigger story, but a big story coming out of this one is in the fourth quarter, Saquon Barkley had what seemed like an open field to run it in for a touchdown on a long run, which would have hit, a lot of rushing overs for people and, the touchdown prop, anytime touchdown score. He didn't do it. He slid to preserve the win for the Eagles, and people are unhappy. And I get being unhappy, but, you know, it is what it is. This is gambling. You gamble and you lose, and that's most of the experience probably most people are having. So, I don't love that it's like a national news story, but, it is what it is. Alright, finally, we have the Commanders defeating the Buccaneers 23-20, best playoff game of the weekend so far. We'll see how tonight's game goes, but Commanders win at the very end of the game to advance, to beat the Buccaneers at home, and, I think pretty sure I picked the Bucks here, so, again, not the best look. Jaden Daniels, 268 yards, 2 touchdowns. He also had 36 yards on the ground. Damami Brown had 5 receptions, 89 yards, and a touchdown. Baker Mayfield had 185 yards, 2 touchdowns. Bucky Irving, 77 yards rushing. And Mike Evans, 7 receptions, 92 yards, and a touchdown. I think coming into this game, a lot of people figured that this would be probably one of the more exciting games on the slate, and it ended up being. These teams are very evenly matched, and now I guess we'll see how it goes in the divisional round for the Commanders. But Commanders fans have to just be absolutely enthusiastic about this. This is their first playoff win since 2005. I think also against the Buccaneers, funnily enough. And I mean, as a Dolphins fan, I've not seen the Dolphins win a playoff game since 2000. Granted, I wasn't really watching then, so I've never seen it. So I can feel a little bit of how Commander fans are feeling, and I'm very happy for them. Like, oh, I would love to experience it one day myself. So, and who knows? I mean, the playoffs, anything can happen. So we'll see what happens in the divisional round for the Commanders. So, a big piece of news for this week that I think we all saw coming is New England Patriots hire Mike Vrabel, former Titans head coach, former player for the Patriots, to be their new head coach, replacing Gerard Mayo. So let's talk a little bit about what Vrabel brings to the table here. The last couple of years, not great in Tennessee, but before that, he was really seen as one of the hottest young coaching commodities out there. He was able to bring a Titans team that was not great. Solid defense, Derrick Henry in his prime, that was great, but Ryan Tannehill was the quarterback, so, I think he had, like, 5 passes against the Patriots when they beat them in the playoffs, but, he's still a relatively young guy, 49, familiar with the organization. Obviously, he's going to what I've heard a lot of people say about him is he's gonna bring a culture to the team of winning. He's going to be a very, like, domineering in a positive way presence for the Patriots. He's going to have stability where maybe they lacked some last season. Again, 54-45 regular season record, 2-3 in the playoffs. So I think it's an interesting hire. I think it could probably work out for it. I'm very excited to see who he brings in for his staff. Patriots have Drake May. I probably, if I was a Patriots fan, I would have preferred that they get Ben Johnson. Is Ben Johnson interested in the Patriots? I don't know, but I would have wanted to build around the tools that Drake May has. And it's not saying that you can't do that. Mike McDermott in Buffalo, I say Mike, Sean McDermott in Buffalo. He is a defensive minded coach, but he's been able, bring in Brian Daboll, kind of mold Josh Allen into the player that he's become these last few years. Maybe Vrabel will have somebody come in to be an offensive coordinator in that same capacity. So very exciting for the Patriots. The other big story on this one is the Patriots are getting a lot of heat for not necessarily taking the Rooney Rule seriously. I mean, if you don't know, the Rooney Rule, it requires organizations to interview minority head coaches for their roles. It's kind of a way to help these minority head coaches get opportunities that they wouldn't otherwise. And sometimes it's kind of used as like, oh, we just have to get it out of the way. And that's certainly what the Patriots did here. They interviewed Byron Leftwich, who was a former offensive coordinator, of course, with the Buccaneers when they won the Super Bowl, was somebody who was seen as a potential head coach, a hot young head coach a few years ago. Unfortunately, that changed after Brady left. He didn't perform as well as he did in the past, and he was fired for from the Buccaneers. He's not a serious head coaching candidate, is what I'm saying, and what a lot of people are saying. And it feels like there was no chance for him to ever get the job. So instead of interviewing somebody who seriously could have actually had an opportunity to be the head coach, they just treated the rule as like a checkbox. And that rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. And I think they should be criticized for it. I mean, I don't think anything will come of it, but I think we should point it out when it happens. We should point out that this is a rule that's put in place to help, and it's being treated as nothing, something that's not important at all, flagrantly by one of the, bigger franchises in the NFL. So we know your thoughts on that, of course, in the comments. Moving on from a coach getting hired, let's talk about coach not getting fired technically, but parting ways with his team. So Mike McCarthy was kind of a free agent with Dallas this offseason. They're working on a new deal. Dallas blocked him interviewing at another place earlier this year. He wanted a long-term deal. Apparently, he didn't want it. He's on 49-34 since becoming Dallas's head coach. And you've had really no playoff success, but they've had regular season success to be sure. It couldn't be worked out, and he is now a free agent, free to interview wherever, free to be hired wherever, and now the Dallas Cowboys are the ones who are looking to frantically hire a new head coach, and I think Jerry Jones, not a famously patient man, of course, and it's not that surprising that they've separated ways. It is kinda surprising that it didn't happen quicker. I would have thought that he would have been gone right after the season just based on the vibes we were getting. Obviously, that didn't happen, and now who knows who knows who the Cowboys rather are going to go after now that McCarthy is off the table. I think that yeah, I just think this could have been handled better from an organization standpoint, but at the same time, I'm, perfectly aware that they're a bad organization. The Cowboys are a bad organization, point blank, period. They should have had more success than they've had. They should have built off the success of the '90s in ways that they absolutely didn't, and it's been more or less a clown show the last, like, 20 years, let's say, since 2000, since, Aikman, Irving, Emmitt Smith all left the team or retired. It's been a bad franchise, and it shouldn't, like, necessarily be looked at as a good franchise, so we'll see who they hire to be the next head coach. Part of the problem with being a head coach in Dallas is, like, you can't really hire a big personality because Jerry Jones wants to be the big personality of the Cowboys. I mean, he has a radio show just talking about the team he owns, which when you're super rich, you can do stuff like that. Of course, a bit of a vanity, but hey, I'm hosting a podcast in a spare bedroom right now that like 30 people are going to listen to. So probably getting a lot more views than that. But interesting move. We'll see where Mike McCarthy goes. I know the Bears want to hire Ben Johnson. I don't know if Ben Johnson wants to go to the Bears, but now that Mike McCarthy's out there, this feels like a Bears head coach in post Lovie Smith era, like the John Foxes of the world. Where it's like, oh, here's someone who had success previously in other places. He's older now. He doesn't really move the needle in any meaningful way, but we're gonna hire him anyways. So yeah, we'll see what happens. That was my dog saying hi. You're watching this, and you're like, what the hell is that big mass of black fur? My co-host Wesley, he doesn't have much to say, but paying a visit for a moment anyways. So that is it for this episode of the Wicked Sports Podcast. Again, thank you so much to everyone who listened, shared, watched the clips of this show this past week. I didn't really know if anyone would be listening. Obviously, we're not doing like crazy numbers by any means, less than 100 views, but still, I'm quite grateful for each and every view from every person. So until next time, we'll see you in the next one.